Have you ever noticed how certain news in Russia seems to be repeated as a dark echo? From time to time, bizarre headlines appear on oligarchs, influential entrepreneurs, and powerful figures that mysteriously fall from windows. These are falls that happen in luxury hotels, hospitals, corporate buildings, and even international travel. Some say it is unlucky. Others claim that it is pure coincidence. But there are also those who see in these cases the invisible hand of Kremlin, discreetly eliminating those who know too much or dare to counteract power. It all starts with the facts. Cases of people falling from windows in Russia have become almost their own news, with a guaranteed prominent in the Western press. And it is no coincidence. One of the most emblematic cases happened in September 2022, when Ravel Maganov, president of giant oil giant Lukoil, fell from the window of the 6th floor of a hospital in Moscow. Important detail: he was under medical surveillance and, months earlier, his company had openly criticized the war in Ukraine. Coincidence? Maybe, but the list goes on. In October of the same year, Pavel Antov, billionaire and deputy Russo, owner of one of the largest food companies in the country, collapsed from a balcony in India during a trip. Shortly before, another executive, Anatoly Gashenko, a former dean of a Russian aerospace university, fell from the stairs inside the institution itself. Not to mention other cases of oligarchs linked to the power sector, all dead in suspicious falls. What do all these cases have in common? Power, influence, and, in many cases, statements contrary to the Russian government or involvement in corruption scandals. But this phenomenon is not exactly new in Russia. The practice of eliminating political enemies in a discreet way comes from afar. In Soviet times, it was common for opponents to simply disappear or die abruptly. In factions, car accidents, window falls, always with a convenient medical report to close the case quickly. Joseph Stalin, during his dreaded purges, eliminated mass opponents, and many of them ended up suicidated in public prisons or places, always under mysterious circumstances. With the arrival of Vladimir Putin to power, former KGB agent, many experts claim that these practices have only changed their clothing. Today, instead of the ancient Soviet methods, there is a new kind of silent purge, where windows falls replace the shooting. The message is clear: who challenges power is at risk. Nevertheless, there are always those who believe in the coincidence thesis. After all, accidents happen. But to what extent is it possible to believe it when coincidences accumulate so conveniently? When you observe the profile of the victims, the pattern jumps into the eyes. Almost all held strategic positions in sectors such as energy, oil and defense, or were involved in financial scandals that could reach more powerful figures. Many were in conflict with the official speech of the Russian government or had too sensitive information to remain alive. Most impressive is the speed with which investigations end. There is always a justification, a medical or police report, and that's it, if closed. Russian state media, in turn, treats these episodes such as isolated tragedies, personal accidents, or psychological problems, always trying to avoid any mention of a possible link between cases. What few know is that behind these accidental falls, there is a complex web of silent interests, blackmail, and punishments. In today's Russia, as well as in other dark periods of its history, power is exercised not only with discourses or military strength, but also with fear, a cold, calculated fear, which settles in business corridors, negotiating tables, and luxury hotels. To better understand this phenomenon, it is necessary to look at the current context. Since Putin took power, Russian policy has been marked by a relentless concept of total control. Anyone who threatens this control, even subtly, can become the target of pressures, blackmail, or something worse. In contemporary Russia, you may not be arrested for your words, but you may have an accident. The message is clear and brutal. The energy sector is one of the most sensitive in this equation. Oil and gas are not only the largest sources of wealth in the country, but also instruments of geopolitical power. Controlling these industries means controlling not only the Russian economy, but also Kremlin's external influence. Therefore, many of those who fell were linked to companies such as Lukoil, Gazprom, or other giants in the industry. These are executives who somehow have failed to align their interests to those of the government. Many of these cases happen almost cynically, as if impunity were part of the ritual. The executive is found dead. Police quickly concluded that it was suicide and the subject of headlines inside Russia. Only the international press continues to record the case, usually with a tone of unbelief. But within Russia, silence prevails. The problem is that this silence is not just the media. He also manifests himself in widespread fear among Russian entrepreneurs and politicians. Most prefers not even publicly commenting on these deaths, and when they do, it is with generic phrases, saying that life is unpredictable. This behavior is not casual, it is a survival mechanism. Everyone knows that any slip can be expensive. Another important point to consider is the symbolism of these falls. They are not random. Falling from a window in many Russian contexts carries a subliminal message. It is an old method already used during the Soviet Union to mask homicides such as suicides. It's like saying, "He threw himself, end of the story," but all around you understand the true message. No one is safe. What impresses is the coldness of the system. In many cases, victims' families are not even able to open independent investigations. The state controls all channels, from expertise to reports. If someone dare to contest the official version, he soon finds himself surrounded by threats or lawsuits. There are also cases where falls seem clearly forced. Witnesses report that the victim was calm shortly before the accident, with no signs of depression or despair, but mysteriously soon after she falls. And no one saw anything. No cameras, no witnesses, no evidence. The most shocking is that this type of death not only reaches entrepreneurs or oligarchs. Journalists, activists, and even doctors have also appeared dead in suspicious circumstances, always involving unlikely falls or accidents. The list is long, and the feeling is that there is an unofficial policy of convenient accidents to solve problems. Even outside Russia, Putin opponents have already suffered attacks, poisoning, and mysterious falls. This shows that the silencing machine has no geographical limits. Where there is someone who bothers, the accident can happen. And it is wrong to think that Kremlin cares about the international image. In the view of many analysts, the Russian government makes a point that these deaths are known in the West, precisely to reinforce the fear and perception that their enemies have nowhere to run. These deaths are, in the background, a form of psychological terrorism. Each new case serves as a reminder for entrepreneurs, politicians, and even ordinary citizens. Challenging power can lead you to forgetting or to the ground after a fatal fall. And in the end, the question remains in the air as an uncomfortable whisper. How many falls are necessary until the world stops calling it coincidence? Behind these deaths is a silent and extremely efficient underworld that few dare to mention aloud. It is an invisible but ubiquitous structure, composed of agents, intermediaries, corrupt businessmen, conniving police, and high-ranking political. This gear, which many call the deep state, acts as a kind of invisible arm of central power, in charge of maintaining order and eliminating threats without leaving visible tracks. This is how everything happens. First, the victim begins to show signs of insubordination, either by public statements, suspicious financial movements, or even approaching political rivals. Then the subtle threats come up: an anonymous phone call, an unexpected visit by authorities, a sudden fiscal investigation. If the person insists on not retreating, the siege closes. In this phase, the misfortune agents come into play, as they are called behind the scenes. They are trained professionals, often with military history or connection with intelligence services, specializing in creating situations that seem perfect accidents. Modus operandi is cold, mathematician, and almost always follows the same pattern. The victim is isolated in a controlled place, without reliable witnesses, and then the accident happens. Window falls are just one of many ways used, but they have a peculiarity that makes them favorite. It is almost impossible to prove that someone has been pushed, especially when there are no cameras or when security records conveniently disappear. Death is instantaneous, the scenario seems obvious, and the investigation closes quickly. In addition, the psychological impact of a fatal fall is very strong. It conveys a clear message of vulnerability. After all, anyone can fall at any time, even in a supposedly safe environment like the office itself or the hotel room. It is a type of terror that infiltrates the minds of all who watch closely. Another important detail is that these operations rarely leave financial traces. Contrary to popular belief, there are no suspicious bank transfers or millionaire contracts behind these actions. Everything is paid indirectly through political favors, future contracts, or state protection guarantees. Executors receive what they call invisible payment, which can range from career promotion to judicial immunity for past crimes. In the power circles in Moscow, this type of operation is known as a discrete definitive solution. No one officially mentions, but everyone knows when it was applied. It is like a system purification ritual, eliminating the elements that threaten the balance of power. The targets of these actions also follow a pattern. Entrepreneurs linked to the energy sector, regional politicians with federal ambitions, investigative journalists, and, more recently, technocrats who dare to question Kremlin's war decisions. No matter the position or influence, if the person poses a risk, he enters the list. This is why many of these cases seem to happen in sequence, almost like a periodic cleaning. A great political or economic crisis is enough to begin the wave of mysterious falls. It was like this after the invasion of Crimea in 2014, and once again occurred in full force after the start of the war in Ukraine in 2022. There are also those who believe that these operations also act as a kind of internal ritual to reinforce loyalty within the regime. The more shocking and commented on death, the clearer is the message to the other elite members. No one is above the law of silence. And there are clear signs that a person may be in the target of this lethal machine. Sudden investigations, disappearances of close allies, virtual attacks coordinated against one's public image, and, of course, growing social isolation. Many of the victims reported, shortly before death, a feeling of being constantly watched, as if all the steps were monitored. What is amazed is that, even in the face of so many indirect evidence, there are still those who insist on calling these cases of coincidence. Perhaps because admitting the existence of this dark machine means accepting a much more disturbing truth. In Russia, power is not just political or economic. It is also, and especially psychological, a power that sustains itself in fear, silence, and certainty that when Kremlin wants, no one is really safe.